Hello everyone, JesterGio here. You might be confused as to why there is different intro music being played right now. Well, the reason for that is because this is the Faro Lady's exclusive song you can get for buying her. From now on, Netties will be posting character themes for newly released characters and older characters going further. So if a character has a new theme going forward, I will be using their theme for my intros. Don't worry, the old Go theme will still be the default in case I review a character without a theme. But we're getting off topic. After all, you do get character themes for getting that specific character. Because of this, Faro Lady is available for all to grab both her and her own theme. Now, I've taken a lot of my time to play Faro Lady and to gather my opinion on her. If you're familiar with my most recent video, Faro Lady didn't leave a good impression on me from the test server, and I even felt she was one of the worst survivors. However, since then, she has received several balance changes aimed to make her kit much better. So today, we will be reviewing those changes, seeing if they fixed her up, go into a final verdict, and then go into tips on how to play her. So, without wasting any more time, let's dive into the Faro Lady, starting with all the balance changes. As mentioned in my intro, Faro Lady didn't leave the best impression on me, and that is for three things: the invisibility, Cypher Steal, and rescue potential. Since that video, she has gotten a wide array of changes made to her, all of which being buffs saved for one. These changes aim to strengthen both her kiting potential, fix any problems with Cypher Steal, and soften the rescue debuff quite a bit. That's the summary of all the changes, so now let's get into the actual details. While Faro Lady's invisibility time hasn't changed alongside the blue trail she leaves behind, she now has a 40% invisibility threshold added to her. Why is this so important? Well, this threshold makes it so a lot of the things that make her so bad don't happen if you do them while under the threshold. If your invisibility is below 40% when you vault a window, drop a pallet, or decode a cipher machine, you will not be forced out of invisibility. Additionally, exiting the cloak radius while below the 40% threshold will not alert the hunter towards your location. If you do reach the 40% threshold, you will be marked when leaving, and any interactions will cancel invisibility still. However, even if she gets marked, the mark now goes away quicker than normal. These are massive buffs made to the invisibility, allowing her to be able to kite a bit more while in it without worrying about losing it. It can also be used as a stealth option now, since it doesn't ping the hunter when below 40% and the ping goes away quickly when it does happen. It also means hunters like BQ or Bonbon cannot abuse the alert by giving them free information. So overall, these are amazing changes towards the invisibility. Onto the Cypher Steal, this aspect got a minor, but necessary change. The Cypher Touch got reverted back from 15% to 10% progress, which kinda sucks in all honesty. However, to make up for this, they reduced the drain on ciphers from 2% to 1%, thank God. 2% is just too much progress lost for a decoding buff other survivors like Mind's Eye and Lawyer can achieve without deleting a cipher. In fact, this made it so using it at any buff that wasn't the 25% buff would put you at a decoding deficit compared to just ignoring it. This change now makes it so that, no matter what, you are always getting value for the team by using this. I would still recommend not using it, and I will explain why later, however this is still an amazing change. Seriously, I don't understand why they upped the drain from 1.5% to 2% in the test server when it wasn't really good in the first place. Finally, they toned down the rescue debuff for Faro Lady, taking it down from 100% to 60%. While this still makes her rescuing really awful, it does prevent the situation where a Faro Lady cannot rescue before the hunter finishes their attack recovery. And that's all the changes made to Faro Lady. They're amazing overall and definitely gave her a much needed boost she lacked in the test server. With the changes out of the way, let's go over some other things I missed when I initially talked about her. While her cane received no new changes itself, it does have a hidden property to it. When your trail hits a wall from an angle, it'll continue to run against that wall in that direction rather than stopping. This'll allow you to more easily divert the hunter, as this can help you change the direction of the trail. It's not much, but it definitely helps her cane go from complete trash to slightly less trash. When decoding ciphers and you use the cipher steal, the game will tell you the decoding percent she will gain via these arrows. One arrow gives the 15% buff, 2 gives the 20%, and 3 gives the 25% buff. While her invisibility doesn't go away when under the 40% threshold now, there are still a few actions that will kick you out, no matter what. Whenever you rescue, use an item, or take damage from the hunter, you will still be forced out of invisibility, so be careful with that. If you perform any interaction and the 40% threshold is reached mid-animation, you will be forced out of invisibility instantly. Finally, Syringe has a weird interaction with invisibility where if your invisibility is off cooldown mid-heal and the hunter is in range, you won't be forced into invisibility until the healing action stops. And that should be about everything about Faro Lady and her changes, although I don't doubt I missed a thing or two. Really good things to note alongside some really good changes that helps her out all around. With that said, I'm sure you all are wondering how this holds up nowadays and what my final verdict on her will be. So with all of this covered, let's dive into the positive impact these changes had on her kid and go from there.
I see myself in disguise, cold as the rain, sour as the pain that has remained here like my scars.
When it came to Faro Lady in the test server, I noted that her invisibility in itself is really good because of how strong invisibility is, so let's start the positives off with that. As mentioned in the test server video, invisibility really helps against hunters because it cancels any marks placed on the survivor, whether it's Nightmare's mark or Clerk's recording. It also hides your highlight from things such as Anne's cats and BQ's mirror, so invisibility is a really versatile tool to have. However, with Magician and First Officer, their invisibility skills are on an item limit, meaning they cannot use it more than the amount they have. However, Faro Lady doesn't have this restriction since her invisibility is tied to a cooldown rather than an item. This means Faro Lady hypothetically has an infinite amount of invisibilities to use during a kite, and these invisibilities are really strong in some cases. They last for 16 seconds and replace your normal footprints with a blue trail, meaning that she has a ton of potential to mind game the hunter. Whether it be walking on her trail or using the cane to trick the hunter, her invisibility can really help out in a kiting situation. Not only that, but the invisibility makes it so you can pass through windows of buildings and the hunter cannot follow you or potentially see you through them. Such as shack windows or the windows on Red Church. These aspects are critical when it comes to helping Faro Lady sneak away and potentially lose the hunter by doing so. What helps even more is that the invisibility doesn't go on cooldown when you escape pursuit, but rather drains 1% per second until it goes back to 0%. This means you will have invisibility again for the next time the hunter chases you again, since it'll never go on cooldown unless it hits 100% or you force it on cooldown. The reduced notification time when you leave the hunter range while at the 40% threshold is such a big deal because it means you can potentially lose the hunter if they aren't paying attention to it. It also means hunters like Bonbon or BQ can't abuse this to get hits on the Faro Lady since it only lasts about 1.5 seconds. The 40% threshold is already a really good change that helps make her invisibility even stronger. It allows Faro Lady to utilize pallets and windows alongside knee-jerk reflexes while still cloaked. This allows for even greater utility in the blue trail and invisibility since you have kiting options and a 50% speed boost to work with. Invisibility is also really good when going for both normal and basement rescues, however that's all I'll say about rescues. Finally, a really underrated thing about invisibility is the fact that it makes her really good when receiving body blocks from the team. Since the hunter cannot see where the Faro Lady is and won't for 16 seconds, it makes getting protection really easy. While the blue trail can hurt your chances, I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker for her, and teammates can still help really effectively. This could be monumental in whether you have a 4-person end game or not, so this aspect of her is really good. When I covered the invisibility in the test server, I thought it was trash because of all the restrictions placed onto it for a subpar result. Now, I do believe it is an okay ability to have with you and helps her chances of surviving by a lot more now. I'm sure you'll notice I said okay and not that it's good, and, well, more on that later. Onto her decoding potential, the changes made it way better than it was in the test server. As stated multiple times, the problem with Faro Lady's decoding potential was that the drawbacks to using it outweighed the reward of that decoding buff. You would essentially sap a cipher's progress for only half of the time you were in your decoding buff, which was really bad. Not only that, but you are actively removing that cipher on the field, which can backfire heavily, especially if the team ends up with 0 ciphers with progress during the late game. With this new change, she can decode 100% of a cipher while only needing 50% of a cipher machine to do, give or take. That's still not great, but it's leagues better than the initial percent. Once again we'll get into that. Even then, there are a few situations where this decoding increase can be really good. If a hunter is trying to chair on your cipher and your cipher is about 80%, it wouldn't hurt to use the cipher steal to finish your cipher quickly. In fact, this ability can be really good for doing burst decoding in moderation, especially if it's the 25% boost. 25% is a lot of decoding speed to have even with a small amount of time, so it's good to use it whenever you feel it's the best. I'll go over all the situations I feel it'll be worth using the cipher steal later on, but just know there are a couple of good uses for it, which is also helped by the cipher touch. Even nerfed, the cipher touch is still an extremely good ability. It effectively saves you about 8.1 seconds off of every untouched cipher, meaning you'll always decode faster than a lot of the survivor roster with this alone. It also helps with your decoding steal, since you're free to drain any ciphers that are about or below 10% on the map and still make up for it with the touch. Finally, the cipher steal ability makes her a very scary survivor to go against when playing Alva. Since Alva's connection always shares progress no matter what, Faro Lady's cipher steal is actually slowed down. This means you can abuse the decoding buffs without the downsides of it, since you will always have ciphers on the field to steal from. This is further enhanced by the cipher touch, meaning you will always have 10% of a free cipher at a touch. That pales in comparison to what happens when Alva starts losing ciphers, however. Since there are less ciphers on the field, the progress spread will instead distribute more progress towards the ciphers left in his connection. This means that you can pause or even gain decoding progress on Alva ciphers while still having your decoding buff. This will make Faro Lady a priority for Alva players to chase, since she essentially turns his gimmick against him in the worst possible way. However, I think the best thing about the cipher steal has got to be the unintentional upsides it grants Faro Lady, which is information. When you hold down the cipher steal button, you can see every cipher that is on the map alongside progress and which survivors are working on them. This is massive information to have, since it allows her to easily find ciphers that other people aren't working on and see where her teammates are. It can also help her pinpoint where the hunter roughly is if a survivor touches their cipher before getting chased. It can also help you see any remaining ciphers on the field, meaning the chances of cipher with progress being left to rot won't be an issue. This isn't the only boon she has, however, as marking a cipher to be drained can also potentially help the team. When you mark a cipher, the progress will be shown to both your team and the hunter, and this can be good in a few situations. You can mark it after priming your cipher to confirm to the team that the final cipher is primed or potentially force the hunter to change onto you. Unlike other survivors, I feel that Faro Lady is one of the stronger endgame survivors thanks to both her invisibility and the fact that she can get chest items. Because of this, Faro Lady is a very scary survivor to face against in the endgame, so marking your prime cipher can be a boon in both factors. Additionally, you can also use it to mark a cipher that's left out for the team to go and decode for themselves and then unmark it as soon as you're about to decode a new cipher. Finally, Faro Lady can use the mark to potentially lead hunters away from ciphers with progress on them like the final cipher. Since marked ciphers usually mean a Faro Lady is gonna drain it, it might put hunters in a dilemma as to whether to stay or leave the cipher. If the hunter leaves, another survivor can get back onto it and put the hunter in a chokehold. If not, you can keep that cipher mark and choose to drain it to force their hands or be patient and let a new cipher be opened. The information that the Cipher Steal ability unintentionally grants actually makes it a really versatile ability and almost makes up for the Cipher Steal aspects being mid. When I covered Faro Lady in the test server, my expectations were in the trash because she brought almost nothing to the team. However, after playing her with her changes, I can confidently say that she is in a far more playable state and is far better than how I viewed her in the test server. However, despite all these positive changes and things about her, I would be lying if I said she was meta or even just decent. While Faro Lady is far better now, there are some aspects to her kit that even the changes cannot save, so let's move on and talk about everything wrong that's holding her back.
And everything you say might just be your fantasy. Whenever you find me up in daydream, here comes the sun shining through the sea.
Even with the vast improvements the Faro Lady buffs did, I feel like a lot of what I said in my initial video still holds up in various ways. Starting with the invisibility, while the improvements definitely make it a viable kiting option, I still think there are certain restrictions that hold it back. For starters, and stating the elephant in the room, you do not have any control of when your invisibility happens and when it doesn't. You might think this isn't a big deal and that you can play her just fine the way she is. And while that is true, I feel that lack of freedom becomes very stifling. That freedom of being able to decide when it triggers or not can potentially grant you greater use cases for your invisibility and make it so the 40% threshold is even less of a restriction. It also means that you can choose when you go invisible based on the hunter and based on the situation, so you won't have moments where it happens at the wrong time. You could argue that if they make her like Gardener's bubble, players will just turn it on and off whenever to get their infinite invisibility, but there are various ways the devs could prevent this. You could just make it so the bar pauses if you turn it off mid-invisibility, or you can turn it off when you do turn invisible like bubble. If you do make it so it pauses mid-invisibility, you could also make it so you still lose invisibility if you paused above the 40% threshold and interact with anything. I don't think it's hard to program a solution to coding in a way to control invisibility, and the fact that they haven't is so confusing. I thought we learned from Ripper and Gardener Netties. Well, with that aside, I guess we should point out the various other problems with invisibility. I've seen a lot of people praising invisibility, showing off clips of it working, and then saying that she's actually good. Well, I'm sure those people don't show every other clip where the Faro Lady's invisibility doesn't trick the hunter at all. Playing Faro Lady, I've had a handful of times where I've gotten the invisibility to fool the hunter and various other times when it doesn't. Even in the cases where it does fool the hunter, I feel like it comes down to luck or if they're gullible enough to be fooled by it. For example, take a look at this clip where I fooled this lizard and got away from him. This is a good thing, right? Well, if you were one of the few people who pointed out he shouldn't have been fooled because of the bent trail, congratulations, you're not a lost cause. On top of it being luck and you needing to be as convincing as possible, there are various other factors that cause Faro Lady to fall flat. Sure, hunters who need visual on Faro Lady like Ivy, Clerk, BQ, Geisha, and Nightmare will struggle against this survivor. However, hunters like Gamekeeper, Bonbon, Joker, Wax Artist, and even Anne, who don't need visual on Faro Lady to still be effective, will decimate even a good Faro Lady. Faro Lady is one of the few survivors who can give herself away when she's near you. Here's an example of what I mean. I'm sorry, didn't catch that. Let me turn down the music and let you listen. Yes, you can hear when Faro Lady breathes next to you and she breathes loudly. Granted, I play the game with the music turned off to listen to Pandora from my computer. However, that still doesn't make up for the fact that Faro Lady both has collision and breathes so loudly. With Magician and First Officer, they're muted with their abilities, allowing them to conceal themselves even more until they're out of invisibility. In fact, they have sound cues when they use their items, but none to tell you exactly where they are. Faro Lady's breathing allows you to pinpoint where she is if she passes or is close to you, which is really bad for trying to mind game. It also doesn't help that the hunter could just guess correctly and land a hit on you, forcing your invisibility on cooldown. Speaking of cooldown, that's another thing that's really restrictive about her kit. Aside from the syringe, every single item forces her out of invisibility when she uses it, and even syringe will force you out if you use it mid-invisibility. This further limits any potential she can have with items and how they work with invisibility, but I can look past that. What I can't look past is the fact that Flywheel will immediately remove invisibility as well, no matter the threshold. It's not a big deal, but it just adds more restrictions to her kit and limits what she can run. You only have 16 seconds of invisibility to use per cycle, which isn't that much time to have on your side, so a talent that cuts your time short is devastating. However, I feel the biggest factor that ruins invisibility is the lack of buffer. For those unaware, a lot of the kiting talents have a buffer system for when their cooldowns are met. Put simply, if Knee Jerk goes off cooldown while you're mid-vault, you will not use up Knee Jerk's speed boost. It's only on your next vault where you'll get the speed boost. This same rule is applied to almost all of the passives in this game except for Cloak. If your Cloak goes off cooldown mid-vault, you will turn invisible mid-vault. More importantly, though, if you reach the 40% threshold mid-animation with anything, you will be forced out of invisibility. This was a problem in the test server when I reviewed it a while back, and it's still a problem now. I've lost games or tied matches that could have been wins because of this lack of buffer system, and it sucks every single time. And before you say they did this to make her unique, need I remind you that they do have some form of buffer system in the form of the syringe. They are aware of the buffer system and can properly use it, so why restrict her further by omitting it from the 40% threshold? To top it all off, her cooldown remains unchanged, and the cooldown is paused when you're not free moving. As mentioned, the 40-second cooldown on her invisibility is too damn long, and the cooldown being paused is so baffling because no other ability works like this. Even Knee Jerk or Norton's Locker Boost passive doesn't pause when not free moving, so the fact that her invisibility does pause is really odd. Recharge item characters can charge their items when on chair, and they only pause during last effort when they're gonna go down. It's even worse because she can get her invisibility back mid-last effort, which can cause the invisibility to happen and Faro Lady to immediately put it on a 40-second cooldown. If it worked like the other survivors' abilities, I feel like Faro Lady would have a chance to have some decent rebound potential thanks to invisibility. It'll happen when you need it the most and won't when you don't, such as last effort. However, with how it is right now, I just don't think her strength justifies this choice. Her invisibility does have its moments and it can help you in a pinch, however I just feel it's still too restrictive to be good, especially for a hunter with spatial awareness. Next is the cane, and nothing has changed about it since the test server. It still has a sound cue and a particle effect to show it was used to fake a trail. You still only have 2 uses, it still has no cooldown. I have tried using the cane to trick the hunter and it does work sometimes. However, I feel like it's more of a hindrance and you're better off ditching it for a better item. Even a wand would be better as it mutes her loud breathing and gives her invisibility while your own is on cooldown. There's really not much to say about cane other than the fact that it makes Cheerleader and Faro Lady have almost no synergy with each other, trash item all around. And that's another problem with Faro Lady I have, the amount of synergy she has with survivors is really bad. Aside from harassers, Faro Lady cannot synergize well with supports like Cheerleader or Little Girl. Since invisibility is a passive cooldown rather than an item cooldown, Cheerleader's refresh will not work on Faro Lady at all, and all it does is put the refresh on cooldown. I haven't heard a lot of Little Girl synergy with her, but I do know that page drop will reveal the Faro Lady's location while invisible. The only real person who has decent synergy with Faro Lady is Postman, and he's not exactly an amazing or even good survivor in any way. With that, we can finally move on to the Cypher Steal, which I also feel isn't very good. I'm sorry, but even with the drain being 1% now, I just don't see the utility of draining a cipher for your own decoding buff. If the decoding progress is 20% or below, I could see an argument for stealing from that cipher. However, anything above that is too much progress to steal in my opinion, especially when we go into the 50% and above category. The reason removing ciphers from the game is so bad is because having decoded ciphers on the field adds pressure towards the hunter and forces them to make choices. It's why I feel keeping the final 90% cipher is good, because it allows the team to work on a new cipher and keep the pressure on the hunter. By removing that cipher from the equation, it makes it so there's less pressure on the hunter. In fact, draining ciphers can also potentially hurt your team in the long run if you aren't careful. In this hunter match I was playing, I went against a Faro Lady who drained the Merc's 40% cipher machine to help her buff. She then drained his cipher again out of its 20% for that same buff. Because of this, rather than having one cipher with 60% progress on it, the team had 3 ciphers with 0% on them by the time I got my win. Now, some people would argue that the cipher steal is meant to be a small price to pay for a massive decoding buff. While I do agree with this logic, it falls flat for 3 reasons. First, I don't think the decoding numbers make it worth running, especially if you end up with the 15% decoding buff. If the numbers were 30%, 25%, and 20%, I could see the justification in the decoding buff because of how rewarding the decoding speed is. Despite that, I don't think the decoding numbers are bad, and I feel the cipher drain changes help make these numbers better. Second, the only way you can receive this buff is via this cipher steal. This means that, unlike a lawyer or a composer, taking over a rescuer's cipher means you are decoding the same speed as a normal survivor. Even Prisoner without his connection has a 5% buff whenever he decodes a cipher, so he has something to help him finish ciphers faster. However, I feel the biggest thing that holds her back are the numerous times where you can't or shouldn't use her cipher steal at all. There will be times where you are doing so well that you can't even use the cipher steal because there are no ciphers to steal from. At the same time, there are also matches where you shouldn't steal from ciphers because you're so behind in decoding. At least with decoders like Lawyer, you have the chance of a comeback because of their permanent decoding buff. With Faro Lady, your ability actively hurts the team and shouldn't be used at all. This is why I feel nerfing the cipher touch from 15% back to 10% was such a bad idea. The decoding buff just isn't worthwhile enough to warrant the decrease, and the fact that there are times where you won't even use it makes it feel bad. With that said, that all pales in comparison to the final nail in the coffin for any chances of her being meta. I'm sure you know what I mean and saw this coming. It's her rescue debuff. While this rescue debuff has been nerfed and is now better to deal with, the fact of the matter is this is still a terrible debuff. Yes, despite the update softening the debuff by a bit, I still feel like this is her worst aspect and why she will never be meta. In a game where rescuing is so important and stuffed rescues can kill a match, having a survivor who puts themselves at risk is a really bad survivor. I would go on further about this point, but I already talked about most of these points already in my last Faro Lady video, and this section is already very lengthy. However, despite all of these glaring issues still in her kit, I wouldn't necessarily call her a bad survivor. She does have a lot of things that do make her a reliable survivor to play, but not enough to make her broken or even good. In the end, I just think she's a mid-survivor who will stomp a lot of new players or people who don't deal with invisibility well and struggle against better hunters and players who are able to deal with her. This is not a bad thing, and I hope people don't see this as me saying this is a bad thing. It's okay to have survivors with certain niches who will struggle against certain matchups, it just means you need to be good at the character and work hard to have her upsides shine. So let's talk about some tips I have after my various matches, which I hope will help you all when you decide to play Faro Lady.
There's nothing to believe, still I hate to be deceived. It's just a mission to complete, hopelessly vain, with no regrets
If I were to rate Faro Lady on my decoder tier list, with the top 3 being Lawyer, Explorer, and Prisoner, I would honestly put her 4th on the tier list. I do genuinely think that, in the current meta and compared to the other decoders in the game right now, Faro Lady has a lot more tools and tricks to allow her to hold her own a bit against some of the hunters in the meta. For example, one of the most oppressive hunters in the game right now is Ivy, and she's at Faro Lady's mercy for the first 16 seconds of a chase because invisibility forces yeek off her. Alva can't leave her alone for a second because she can use your Cypher share ability against you. There are a lot more hunters who will struggle against her, like there are hunters who will beat her, so be sure to learn the matchup. As for potential builds, I do think Knee Jerk and Borrowed Time is her strongest build. The speed boost can really help while your invisibility is coming back off cooldown, and it can even help mess with the hunter during said invisibility. You can run Flywheel if you want, but be mindful that using it while invisible will force you out of invisibility, no matter what. More power to you if you run Tide on her. I'm just not gonna humor the idea in the slightest. Starting our tips now with her invisibility, the first thing you need to be wary of is your threshold timer. Like I said, there is no buffer system with it, so interacting during it will force you out no matter what. Because of this, it is extremely important you keep your eyes on the threshold timer. If you feel you don't need invisibility anymore, you can interact as you please, but it's very important to make the most of invisibility until absolutely necessary. In terms of actually kiting, you should always do your best to shake up your kiting patterns while invisible. Contrary to popular belief, IDV players are not stupid and they will adapt to any patterns you are showing while invisible. Because of this, it is very important you keep switching up what you do, whether it's doubling back when running into the hunter, just kiting like normally, or trying to run past them. If you decide to keep your cane, use that to your advantage as well. Remember, the cane can run along walls if used at an angle, so it can help with your diversions. They can also go up or down staircases, so be sure to make the most of the two canes you have. Another good tip I would say will help your Faro Lady matches is to try and use your tools in order to either break chase or keep hidden from the hunter. Being able to break chase as huge as Faro Lady is, it'll give you time to recharge your invisibility for when the hunter is gonna chase you again. And with the 40% threshold being added, Faro Lady's invisibility can be used as a solid stealth tool to get away. Combine that with certain terrain and certain maps being strong with her like Leo's, and it makes stealth rewarding. I cannot stress enough to be careful when you try and run past the hunter as Faro Lady. You still have collision that the hunter can bump into, and your breathing can give away your position if you aren't careful. While I don't think cane is a good item at all, I do think there are some use cases for it. I already mentioned that cane can go up and down stairs, but it can also go down holes and other ledges. This can really help your Faro Lady gameplay, as the hunter will need to make a gamble whether to drop down or not. Additionally, it is best to use your cane when you are not in the hunter's line of sight, since there is an audio and visual cue for when you use it. Try and use your cane to trick the hunter and then gain as much distance as possible. Otherwise, I highly recommend just ditching the cane when you have time and scout out for a new item. Moving on to the Cypher steal, there are 3 situations where I feel stealing a Cypher is genuinely worth it if the hunter isn't Alva. The first instance is if there is a Cypher on the field with 10 to 20% progress on it. Because of your Cypher tap ability, you can easily make up those 10 to 20% progress that was lost in the drain will grant you a 10 to 20 seconds of increased decoding. 20 seconds with the max decoding buff can really cripple a hunter and allow you to gain a head start in the match, so stealing at those percents is recommended. It's only when we get to the 30 and 50% marks where I wouldn't recommend stealing, since those numbers are even more significant and better off for your team to decode. That is, unless you use her drain in the second best way to use it, which is to help you complete a Cypher that's around 80 to 90%. This is pretty much the alternative to working on your early game Cypher, and it's still really good. It allows you to get to more Cyphers a lot quicker, and even helps if the hunter tries to chair a survivor on your Cypher. Once again, however, moderation is key. Do not sap a Cypher from 60% all the way to 0%, you are helping no one by doing that. The final situation where the Cypher steal is helpful is during the end game, but not in a way you'd think it would be. Personally, I don't think draining the final Cypher was a good idea when it was first suggested in the test server, and I still don't think it is. That final Cypher is a threat the hunter is forced to defend, so removing it will convince them to leave from it. However, if there's a second Cypher the hunter is guarding with less progress, or the hunter abnormals the final Cypher, then I feel it'll be good to steal. Unlike an 80% Cypher, a 30 to 40% Cypher does not seem like a big threat to the hunter, so you can get some pretty big decoding time off of it. At the end of the day, however, it's your call whether you feel the steal will be worth it in your situation or not. I already covered the information aspect of Faro Lady pretty thoroughly, so just remember the information aspect is really strong. If you absolutely have to go into rescue, try your best not to get hit while approaching the chair and try and force the hunter into attack recovery before the rescue. Your slow rescue speed makes it too much of a risk to allow the hunter to recover, and you could also risk farming your teammate off chair. So either mitigate your risk as you rescue or just let your team do the rescues. Finally, and I know I shouldn't need to say this, but do not let any of this discourage you from playing the characters you want to play. I feel like we are in an era where people who don't like a certain character and people who love that same character will constantly attack others who disagree with their viewpoint. I don't want this video to be that, me trying to convince you to stop playing Faro Lady because I dislike her. In fact, I played her a ton when I got around to making this video, and I'm even gonna get a badge for her by my ranked sessions. I definitely do see the appeal to her, and I do love seeing weirdly average characters get love for their gameplay styles, even if they aren't necessarily meta. So have fun with Faro Lady and keep playing the characters you love without judgment. Just try your best not to make a bad name for yourself. I'm sure a certain time of reunion character will agree with this. With that, we conclude this deep dive into Faro Lady and my thoughts on her after her release. I'll be honest, I did not expect these sections to get as long as they did. However, I feel like that says a lot about Faro Lady and how her release has got me thinking. Overall, I've been pretty satisfied with playing Faro Lady, and I do think she will genuinely be one of my mainstays for my Survivor roster. I know I say that about a lot of characters, but I do really like playing decoders except for mechanic, so this Survivor will fit my roster well. The next video will be when the test server releases, so look out for that. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I will see all of you next time.